Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. July 6, 2024. By now I'm sure that all of you have seen the sickening video of the heinous murder of Sonya Massey. At the very least, you've no doubt read about it. I've watched the video and it is absolutely infuriating. Shades of what happened with the murder of Tatiana Jefferson. In this case, Sonya Massey was the one who called the police to tell them that there was a prowler outside of her house. She made the mistake of thinking that these guys were in the business of public safety. They're actually in the business of upholding white supremacy and enforcing anti-black violence. In this case, the assailant was a deputy with the Sangamon County Sheriff's Department, Sean Grayson. From the very moment he arrived at the scene, he began being belligerent, argumentative, and aggressive toward Miss Massey. He was arguing with her on the porch of her own home and then proceeded into the house after her, as if apparently he thought that she was some sort of suspect. This guy was itching for a fight with a person who called him for help. And as a result, he told her, well, there's a pot of boiling water on the stove. You need to go and turn it off before it starts a fire or something. After all of this arguing that she had to do with this guy, she did what any Christian would do. She rebuked him in the name of Jesus. That's when he drew his gun on her. Not because she had a weapon, but because as far as he was concerned, he was going to show her who was boss. He shot her dead while she was holding up her hands saying, "Don't shoot." He did this to her, shooting her dead in her own home. Not because she did anything, but because he wanted to prove that he could kill someone. This was a power play by these white supremacists who are the weakest chumps in the room. Surprisingly, Grayson was actually arrested for this crime, and a grand jury indicted him on 3 counts of first-degree murder, aggravated battery with a firearm, and official misconduct. At last report, he's currently being held in the Menard County Jail without bond. And once again, the bravest, most honorable people in America, the white media tells us, are reassuring everyone that this latest blatant murder doesn't represent their values or training. The thugs in blue are trying to tell everybody that we didn't see what we clearly saw, and that they aren't doing what they do every single day. Because this kind of behavior happens constantly in America, and we've heard these same empty denials every single time that this occurs. This guy was a walking pile of red flags. He had been with at least 6 different departments in only 4 years. Before that, he had been in the Army, but in 2016, he got himself discharged due to serious misconduct. But rather than give him a dishonorable discharge, which is what he actually deserved, he was instead given a general discharge, but was allowed to say that it was under honorable circumstances. That's a contradiction in terms. In too many cases, the general discharge is misused as a way to whitewash some individual who should have been kicked out of the Army with a dishonorable discharge. Now, this guy, what he got kicked out for, at least in part, was related to a DUI that he got while he was in the Army, but that didn't stop his commanding officer from giving him a glowing letter of recommendation to whatever employer might be looking to hire this reprobate. And the employers knew about this. Now, this guy got at least 2 different DUI convictions in Macoupin County in 2015 and 2016. When Grayson was held in the county jail there, records show that he refused to submit a breath sample. After threatening to pee his pants or pee in a trash can in his holding cell, Grayson told the officer who arrested him that he was, quote, too small to be making him mad. At the time he murdered Sonya Massey, he was working for the Sangamon County Sheriff's Department, and they confirmed that they were aware of both of his DUIs, and yet they hired this creep anyway. Previously, he had been in the Kincaid Police Department, but he was let go from there after he refused to live within a 10-mile radius as required by the village. Mike Lawrence, one of Kincaid's Board of Trustees, said that he wasn't surprised to learn that Grayson gunned down an unarmed woman who posed no threat to him in her own home. As Lawrence put it, "I thought he was a loose cannon. He was just arrogant and cocky." Grayson had also been with the Logan County Sheriff's Office. He was only there a year, but in that brief amount of time he pursued a vehicle at speeds of 110 miles per hour against the direct orders of his superiors, and he eventually hit a deer. But rather than fire him, his supervisors recommended high-stress decision-making training for him. Now, as we all know, when it comes to these mindless thugs, you're not going to be able to train them out of their behavior. You can't train a psychopath. You can only punish them. But in America, you protect these little scumbags, and as a result, they don't get any training or punishment. Given his murderous behavior, his problem wasn't high-stress training. To have this towering caveman being belligerent and confrontational with a small, unarmed black woman who had called him to do a service call, and then to murder her for no reason in her own home, that's not the result of high stress. It's the result of police departments seeking out thugs like this, whose only qualification is whether they'll make good cogs in the machine of white power. And you won't be surprised to learn that Grayson had been married, but of course he's divorced now. During the divorce, his now ex-wife cited extreme and repeated mental cruelty without cause or provocation as the reason for dissolving their marriage. Now, details of exactly what she's talking about are unknown, but given his behavior, how he came to Sonya Massie's home and began arguing with her from the beginning, this guy was being belligerent and threatening toward this woman and ultimately murdered her for no reason whatsoever, just murdered her in cold blood. I think we can probably take some educated guesses as to what exactly the wife meant when she said extreme and repeated mental cruelty. Now, these are just a few of his crimes and misdeeds that have come to light. The totality of his military discharge hasn't been made completely public, and there's no telling how many disciplinary problems he's had across the half-dozen police agencies he worked with, to say nothing of how many citizens' complaints there are against him that these departments have covered up over the years. The white media always minimizes these criminals' deeds. The body cam video was clearly damning. The racist police have made it their standard operating procedure that whenever police kill someone, if they think the video makes them look good, then they'll release it immediately and lecture the public about how heroic they are and how claims of police brutality are all false, and they'll brag that they have nothing to hide, that they believe in total transparency because they released one video quickly. It only takes them hours to release a video when they think it justifies them killing someone, but if it shows them for the cowardly, racist murderers they actually are, then all of a sudden the video has to be hidden away, concealed. There's no bragging, no lecturing the public. On a side note, you notice how you can count on one hand the number of times the police have actually been able to show a video that allegedly justifies their behavior? The criminals know that they're scum, but they don't know if the public will punish them for it. And when you look at this Cro-Magnon-looking degenerate, he seems like every neo-Nazi race soldier you ever saw. All of those tattoos with skulls and such. All of the same kind of iconography that you find with every sort of white supremacist who's out there. Only thing he's missing is the huge beard. And why did he commit this vile, premeditated murder? We all know why. Because he knows he lives in a white supremacist ethno-state where race soldiers like himself are protected. They all know this. They know that they can break the law, get kicked out of the military, get a job in any police department they want with no questions asked, and then rack up a bunch of DUIs with no consequences. He knows that he lives in a country where his skin color gives him genetic immunity from the law. He should have been locked up on felonies a long time ago, but this racist country doesn't do that. The police departments he worked for knew of his rancid military record and his DUIs and his problems in other police departments, but they still eagerly hired him anyway, one after the other, not because they didn't know his background, but because police and sheriff's departments are not in the business of public safety. They're taxpayer-supported street gangs, and just like with any street gang, the most important thing is how willing the gang member is to use violence against innocent people. We'll continue with the moment of truth in just a moment, but first, a word from the official sponsor of Black Empowerment, Power Tools. There's no telling when something's going to come up, so make sure you carry your power tools at all times. You never know when you're going to need to bring the hammer down, or when you'll have some trash that needs to be blown away, or some obstacle that requires cutting down. Don't get caught empty-handed. Keep your hammer close by. Keep that leaf blower at the ready, and always carry your steel. Power Tools, because no matter what your day job or side hustle may be, there's no excuse for not being ready to put in some work. Now, I think this would be a great time to ask once again, where's the Back the Badge crowd at? Where's the Sean Hannitys and the false newses at? Where are all these clowns who can always be counted on to say, well, we have to wait until all the facts come out? Where are those people at? Or the ones who always ask, why are you making a rush to judgment? Where's the rush to judgment accusation at now? Come on. Where's the, well, we gotta wait till all the facts come out. What facts do you need to know? But of course, these people only use those talking points whenever there's no video of these murders. If there's no video of the black person being murdered, then they can't wait to say, well, we need to wait till all the facts come out. Well, why are people making a rush to judgment? But whenever there is a video, instead of defending the police, instead, we get their secondary line of BS. Why, not all cops are like that, or there's lots of good ones out there and we can't be smearing them. None of them stands by the families of the victims. Not even once. They never do that. Now, if you're going to be backing the badge, why don't you also back the victims of these crimes too? Now, in this case, the family has retained the services of Benjamin Crump. And that being the case, well, hopefully he's not going to be backsliding into his ambulance-chasing ways. We'll see if the family holds his feet to the fire on that. I've only seen one or two mentions of them saying that they believe race played a part in this. That kind of rhetoric is a little bit too tepid for my tastes. But the murder of Sonya Massey is just another in the endless line of examples of killers who are protected by every arena of society. The military, which is the foreign wing of the enforcement arm of white supremacy, protected this guy. Instead of giving him the punishment he deserved, instead they worked to give him a soft landing when he was kicked out of the military. And this enabled the police department, the domestic wing of the enforcement arm of white supremacy, to hand him job after job after job. And no matter how many disciplinary problems he presented them with, no matter how many DUIs, he was allowed to just bounce from one agency to the next. And even though they knew all about his past, they still hired him anyway. That's the reason why we shut people down when they try to claim, oh, well, these guys are just a few rotten apples. No, when you have this many rotten apples, that means there's something wrong with the entire orchard. On top of that, when you have these agencies who admit, yeah, we know all about these guys' past, yeah, we know all about their numerous criminal convictions, we're going to hire them anyway. Now, what does that tell you? What that tells you is the problem is not and has never been a few rotten apples. These police and sheriff's departments seek out degenerates like this Sean Grayson character. This is the kind of person that they want. And it's precisely this guy's lawlessness that makes them think he fit in perfectly with their little criminal organizations. Oh, by the way, on a side note, there was a second sheriff's deputy who was on the scene at the murder of Sonya Massey. He was standing right in the living room when Sean Grayson murdered her in cold blood. And this guy also has a bunch of tattoos, suspicious-looking tattoos, just like Sean Grayson. And people online have already been pointing out that guy's tattoos and saying, hey, look at this. Looks very suspicious, don't it? The point, though, is this second deputy, he was not charged at all. So what's the difference between him and Sean Grayson? Sean Grayson fired off his shots first, that's all. The second guy may not have fired his gun at all, but the problem is it shows these guys are not just a few bad apples. What's happening here is this is these sheriffs and police departments working exactly the way that they're supposed to, exactly the way that white power wants them to. The killings that they commit is exactly the reason that they were hired, specifically to show that they would use unrestrained, sudden ambush violence against black people. That's what these police and sheriff's departments look for. They're looking for individuals who are going to be good little cogs in their anti-black machine. This is the evil that black Americans face. The Biden administration is talking about a DOJ investigation of some sort. As I pointed out to you yesterday, what this actually would call for is a police accountability commission. But Biden already said, well, I know I promised that during the campaign back in 2020, but I'm just too busy for it. I just realized now how busy I am. I just realized it right after I won the election. I didn't know it before I won the election, but I realized it now. And because of that, let Congress handle this. And this is the same Joe Biden who eagerly suggested that COVID relief money needed to be diverted to these street gangs, police and sheriff's departments. You got these people out here pointing out that, well, Donald Trump's no different and no better than that, but the problem happens to be you're not telling people that they should vote for Donald Trump. I'm certainly not. But you got these same individuals who say, well, let's vote for Biden anyway because Trump would be worse. Well, what do you mean by worse? Would Donald Trump be giving millions and millions of dollars to police departments so that they could carry out killings of black people and have absolutely no strings attached? That's what Joe Biden did. So you're saying that Donald Trump would do the same thing? Would Donald Trump decide that in the face of numerous police murders of black citizens, what's called for is not an open task force to go after the police, but instead, do you think Trump would simply say, well, we're going to put out a press release that we're looking at this and we'll get back to you with whatever our opinion is on this? See, if you have a black person who's accused of harming somebody who's a police officer, they don't have to have any press releases. They can tell you instantaneously, oh, this will not stand. But black people are being murdered in cold blood. There's no question of what happened. And all of a sudden, well, we'll have to get back to you about that. We got to look into this. Because that's what Joe Biden's doing. He's kicking the can down the road. We'll have to get back to you on this. That's what he's doing. How is this different than Trump? This is about incentivizing people to do what we say, not trying to figure out how to make excuses for voting for the lesser of two evils, because that don't work. Though I've noticed that a lot of the shills, especially since Kamala Harris has ostensibly gotten the nomination, or at least she's heavily favored for it, now we're starting to see some of these Democrat shills sticking their heads up. As we get closer to the election, these shills and operatives have to earn their butter biscuit crumbs, and this is how they do it. And it's precisely that kind of moral cowardice and intellectual dishonesty that allows the Sean Graysons of this world to run around killing black people with impunity because the pressure that needs to be applied to punish them doesn't get applied. That's what has to change. And something else that has to change is we got to make sure that these judges aren't allowed to hand out acquittals from the bench. Illinois doesn't have a death penalty anymore, but this animal is supposed to spend the rest of its days in a cage, solitary confinement. Lock this animal in a box and then just walk away. That's what's supposed to happen. But I can promise you, the fix is going to be in for something like this, mainly because the white supremacists understand that their crimes are being documented, people are paying attention, and that being the case, if people pay enough attention enough times, what you get is consistency. People are going to be looking and saying, hey, you can't just have it where these guys are killing people and they keep getting the same old 4 or 5 years. Sooner or later, it's going to be, well, these guys are going to start getting 50 to life. That's what the white supremacists want to head off. And that's the reason why these judges have to be looked at and examined, and they have to be punished when they keep trying to give these lowball sentences. Because we know what they're actually doing. They're trying to give acquittals under the cover of being a sentence. If the jury doesn't come back with an acquittal, then the judge will simply look and overrule them and say, well, I'm not going to give them any sort of harsh punishment. The judges have made themselves every bit as culpable in these murders as the perpetrators. No policy of punishing these thugs with badges is complete unless these crooked judges also have to face consequences for the part they've played in all this. So we'll be keeping an eye on this particular crime, not just to make sure that this killer is actually convicted, but also to make sure that he receives the sentence that he's supposed to. What happened to Sonya Massey was not merely a crime, it was an abomination. This woman was a mother, and her child is going to grow up without her mother now, not because her mother did anything wrong. Sonya Massey did nothing wrong, but because this society is hell-bound and determined to protect these criminals, especially if they have genetic immunity from law. The public is making renewed demands that these police who keep bouncing from one agency to another not be allowed to do so. That these so-called law enforcement agencies not decide that they're going to hire individuals who clearly have completely, thoroughly degenerate criminal past like this guy did. That's what the public's saying. But the Biden administration's sitting there twiddling their thumbs. As far as they're concerned, they're just going to lay low and let the public blow off some steam as they see it. You don't see anyone in the Biden administration talking about how it's important to have some sort of police accountability commission. We need to actually track these guys and follow them and make sure that they can't just bounce from one agency to another. You don't hear Biden and anyone in his camp talking like that. You don't hear Kamala Harris talking like that. Yeah, the former prosecutor. Imagine that, a former prosecutor who's not too keen on punishing the police because she's not talking about legislation to punish them either. And this is precisely what encourages these degenerate murderers like Sean Grayson. They know that the powers that be, the so-called legislators, are not actually looking to punish them for their criminality. So that being the case, why not take advantage? Well, if that's the calculation that he's made in his mind, it's up to the public to change that mental calculus, not just for Sean Grayson, but for all the rest of these thugs with badges. To make it clear that just like in 2020, if you have all of these policymakers who have decided that they're going to side with the murderers, then it's going to be the public who makes it crystal clear that the highest arbiter of what is legal or illegal isn't these so-called police or these prosecutors or these crooked judges. The actual arbiter of what is legal and what isn't are the people. And if you defy the people long enough, they will eventually hand down their own verdict. And from that, there will be no appeal. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Kari Brasher, Starlet Thompson, Argentria Harden, Williams, and Nora Brown. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.